Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar on making the move to Magento 2. First things first, if you can hear me, please raise your hand. You should have a little button to do that in your control panel. Okay, great. All right, so just so you know, throughout the full webinar, you can type in any questions you have in the webinar pane. We've already had questions sent to us in advance, and we've left plenty of time at the end, so we'll hopefully be able to answer them all. My name is Lea Naaman, and I'm the head of marketing at Shoppimon, and I'll be your host for today's M2 presentation. But don't worry, I haven't showed up alone. I'm joined by someone, first of all, that you probably all already know, Ray Bogman, SupportDesk CTO and Magento Doctor. Welcome, Ray. We're very excited to have you.
Thank you, Leah. Thank you for having me.
In case everybody hasn't heard just yet, Ray is about to release a fantastic book that breaks down all you need to know about Magento 2 in detail, called Magento 2 Cookbook. And we'll share a chance to win a free version of that with you later on. And of course, we're also joined by our Shoppimon co-founder and CEO, Roy Rosinnes. Hi, Roy.
Hey, Leah. Hey, everybody.
Okay, so now before we jump into the really interesting stuff, just a little bit of a background on who we all are. So first of all, Shoppimon. At Shoppimon, we've spent the last couple of years helping Magento businesses answer one simple question. Is my business open for business? We help make sure that Magento retailers and agencies know that their stores are up and running and that nothing is standing in their way of customers making a purchase. And of course, if a problem does happen, we make sure they know about it before their customers do. We're also lucky enough to work with some incredible companies like SupportDesk, Waymo, Nike, Nestle, and many, many more. And on to Netherlands-based SupportDesk, who have been around since 2011 and are dedicated to providing Magento and Joomla support for its merchants and retailers. Basically, once your store is up and running, these are the guys to go to for help with performance, security, upgrades, debugging, you name it. They'll keep your shop in tip-top shape. And with 6 in-house certified Magento developers and over 20 Magento and Joomla experts, you'll be in pretty good hands. Now, with no further ado, Roy, I'd like to hand off things to you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Leah. Thanks for the great introduction. And I'm happy to jump in on this this webinar and host it together with Ray. We've been long-time colleagues and friends, and been working together for a long time. And I think it's a great opportunity for us to share some insights at this interesting moment where Magento is switching to its next generation, a much anticipated release that's been in the works for years. A lot of it is a rewrite, a lot of it is improvements on existing features, and we'll go through each of them. So we'll go through the main points there in order to allow you to better understand what's there, is it worth it, and how painful will the migration be, and whether or not it's a good fit for you. So one by one, if we're looking at the points that we want to cover, we'll first of all look at Magento 2 versus Magento 1. We'll see how these compare, and then we'll jump into some best practices to let you know how to go about the migration in a way that that will hurt the least and will allow you the greatest level of flexibility. Ray has already dived into the bits and details of doing such migrations, so he knows exactly what to wait for and what to watch out, and can recommend on many things in order to do it right. And finally, we'll look at once the store is up and running, or as it comes out into production, how to make sure that your business is actually running, the shoppers can go through it, make a purchase, and look at some initial results from initial stores that actually did the migration and how they compare to previous Magento 1 installations, with the intent of eventually answering the question, do you or do you not need to migrate at the moment? So if we can jump to the next slide, we'll dive right into it. Basically, when we're looking at Magento 2 versus Magento 1, we have a few differences. The main, well, I don't know if the main one, but one of the biggest promises, and the one that I think everybody is looking for, is improvement in scalability and performance. Performance comes in many flavors, and meaning and being able to scale your Magento installation by separating database servers, etc. And we'll go into that in further details in a moment. Means that you can do more. So for example, if you compare Magento 2 to Magento 1, you can see that browsing the catalog, just going through the products, going through categories, etc., you have a vastly better throughput with Magento 2 of close to 10 million views in a benchmark that was done versus 500K views with Magento 1. And then when you look at checkouts and orders, it's almost double the performance, so we're able to do twice as much. So if we want to translate that into numbers, if you take a ballpark of a user journey being, let's say, 5 pages in the store, you are able to serve up to 2 million users in 1 hour, which is a huge difference from 100,000 users with Magento 1 installations. And then when it comes to checkout, the bottom line can go up to $4.5 million per hour if you're working at full capacity. If we're looking at an average deal of $50 per purchase, you're able to do 90K checkouts in an hour. It translates to $4.5 million, more than double what you would do in Magento 1. And that, of course, hopefully, if you're operating at full capacity and peak performance in peak times like Cyber Monday or Black Friday, etc. So that actually affects the bottom line in a very clear way. Other than that, you have a new designed and very intuitive admin panel, which allows you to drag and drop and arrange columns and navigate much easier. Ray will go into that later. Greater stability via testing framework that you can actually verify the codes on a regular basis automatically before releasing, so you don't hurt the stability of your Magento store. Vastly better performance, more than just browsing, also faster add to carts, and also a separation of databases, which we'll touch later, that allows you to manage the store in an improved way. Improved compatibility, that means that every minor upgrade that you do is covered by a dependency checker, and again, we'll go into that later, but basically it means that there are no surprises as you deploy minor upgrade of your store. Can we jump to the next slide, Leah? Thank you. Responsive design. So not only does your store now performs better and is viewable to your customers on a mobile device, but you can also actually manage your store from a mobile device, so you're no longer locked into your office or your desktop computer. You can do all the admin management via your tablet or your phone if you're adventurous. So a huge plus there. Caching. We'll show you a few stats, and Ray will talk about that again in depth. But a huge improvement on performance. It comes right out of the box with Magento 2, which was not there with Magento 1. Ready support, same thing, different type of caching. Again, ready-made out of the box, and split of databases in Magento Enterprise Edition, which we'll dive into and allow some of the scalability that we've touched before. So these are kind of the points that we're going to touch, and now let's dive and talk about each one in detail. So in terms of databases, what does what does the split of database mean, and why is it scalable? So in Magento Enterprise Edition, Magento 2 Enterprise Edition, or let's start with Magento 1. Magento 1 was actually a monolith application. It was very big application with one database that handled all aspects of your store, be it checkouts and orders, or loading product data, doing order management, or whatnot. So your customers and your administrators and your marketers, everything was sitting and accessing the same database. And if you had to scale one aspect of the store, you had no choice but to scale the whole thing. So you had to buy more servers. You had to, even if it was just one aspect, for example, of managing your product and entering them into the catalog. That was the world of Magento 1. With Magento 2, you're able to split these databases. So on the technical level, there is still a master database or a single point of access for the more technical listeners among you. As developers, you will access it the same way that you have accessed it before, but then behind the scenes, you have databases that are separate and handle each aspect of the store separately, which means that if your biggest challenge or bottleneck is, for example, the catalog, actually users browsing through your stores, your products, your categories, then you can tackle that. You can actually take that database, put it on a different server, expand that server, add resources there, and leave the rest of the databases on a normal or on your standard installation, and thus cutting costs while ensuring top-notch performance. More than that, if you're doing some maintenance or uploading catalogs, etc., this will allow you to separate the processes, so your marketers and your product managers that are updating your products will not affect the users that are actually now browsing and are looking to buy them, which is a huge plus. Imagine before you had 3 administrators trying to figure out something in the system, or just uploading a whole new set of products or the new collection that just came out. They would hold the performance for the actual customers that are browsing the stores. So huge difference in performance, which allows the numbers that I was talking about just before. Next slide. Testing and stability is a big thing with Magento. For those of you that have tried, that have went through a few upgrades before with Magento 1, you know that anything that is very hard to test all the customization and modules as you install them before you actually release them. Magento 2 now offers, it's open source, available in GitHub. It offers a test framework, a Magento test framework, which comes out of the box with some basic tests and allows you to expand and actually write your own scripts based on Selenium to automate smoke tests or functional tests, and make sure every time you make an update to the store that everything is in line and no surprises are hidden within the code and catch you unprepared in production. So a vastly different, scalable, and safe mechanism of releasing new code. By the way, this is the way that software is done, has been done in the past years in other realms, and Magento is actually catching up now, and it's a great addition to the arsenal of the developers of Magento. Moving on, standardization. Again, this is making sure that the contracts between the different software elements within Magento are kept, and the dependencies are also not forgotten. So again, those of you that have went through upgrades in Magento 1 may remember that custom code or some libraries that were added, or maybe even extensions that required some libraries within Magento to be packaged within Magento, they had to be managed manually, or you had to remember them, and you had to recompile, or you had to rebuild the store until everything was functioning correctly. So not anymore. Using Composer, and again, this is a tool that is being used by development organizations throughout the software community, and Magento is now catching up and standardizing the deployment. It basically, what Composer will do is basically compose the application for you. So it actually takes you through the process of making sure that all dependencies are met, all code can run, nothing is missing. And every time you update your installation, you also update Composer. So when you upgrade, you don't need to remember anything. Everything is handled for you automatically. All the latest and greatest and fitting versions are downloaded automatically. And hopefully going forward, or this is what it means going forward, the upgrades, the minor upgrades will be much, much smoother and with less surprises. Can we jump to the next slide? Okay, Ray, I'll hand this one over to you, the features and improvement that you're already working with.
Well, thank you, Roy, for hanging over. Great slides, by the way. Hi, everybody. I'm Ray, and I'd like to share some insights about the additional features and improvements. And during the time when writing the Magento 2 cookbook, I did a lot of tests regarding to the mobile response design and the improvements on performance. And for those out there who are not familiar with mobile response design, it's a really nice feature. It's been there for a couple of years, and the main option is that it scales automatically from a desktop to a tablet or to an iPhone viewport. And looking right now at the default theme that Magento created and the performance liability on that, it's really fast. I did some tests on a web server which was located in New York, and did some tests from physically an iPhone when I was in Berlin, and running the websites. The default Magento installation was astonishing. Within 1.5 seconds on a live environment, Magento popped in on a mobile response design. Looking at that, all the images which are shared in Magento, they are being optimized default. In Magento 1, we didn't have the ability to optimize the images, and now once you start uploading all the images to the Magento backend, they get tuned, and once you use them online, you will see a crispy, really fast loading images, which is really great for mobile response. And if you want to use all the features within the Magento backend, like merging and creating everything in a static directory, you will see that while using, for instance, the Google PageSpeed measurement tool, Magento is graded as an A level. And this is really astonishing, definitely for Magento. Compared to Magento 1 and Magento 2, there's a really huge improvement on the front-end elements of Magento. Next slide, please. So another one are the really great features on Magento 2, and I think this is one of the great features for people who are working within the admin grids a lot of times, is that, well, there's a drag and drop, I think, which is really cool, but that's not maybe the coolest feature in there. We've got an option to create personal grids. I know from experience from my last years working on Magento since 2008 that every web shop in the backend, they want to have a personalized grid, and you need an extra module for doing that. And now by default, there's an option to create as many grids as you like, depending on your store and your store view, and you can drag, drop, select the columns that you need. So every time you log in to the backend of Magento, you go to your products or to your sales catalog, you can easily select your preferred view and drag, drop all the elements together. And by using that on a default basis, it's even much faster than the one we used in Magento 1. So you will see also administrating all the products and features in there. It's going much quicker than before, which is, I think, a really good enhancement. Besides that, well, mentioning the whole responsive theme layer, it would now have the ability to have a vertical navigation on the left, which is really comfortable depending if you are using, for instance, an iPad, like we already mentioned. And that really increased the possibility. So there's a full screen integration. While working and creating products, for instance, in the back end, right now we have a production flow where it's easy to create, for instance, configurable products. Magento 1 was really hard and took a lot of time for creating them. Right now there's a production flow can create a new product, and by just mentioning the attributes that you prefer, automatic virtual products or simple products are being created. That it creates a really fast option to create products in the back end. Right now it's still on an early stage, so some minor bugs are in the back end, which I'll probably go into later. But this is one of the really cool features, which is a great enhancement. Next slide, please. I think maybe the coolest one, which is why everybody was looking into, is definitely the performance. I mean, going back from Magento 1, there was a cache up capability, but the cache was not as fast as we preferred. I mean, there was no full page cache. We needed extra modules installed, some open source, some paid, and they really did a really good job. Some people they preferred really fast websites, and they sometimes came across on using a front-end proxy by the name of Varnish. It sits before the Magento server, and it handles all incoming traffic and serves all pages who are being cached within the Varnish cache back to the customer. And for all the dynamic elements, for instance, putting a product in a shopping cart, the requests are put through to the Magento backend. And now we have the option within Magento 2 that there is a default configuration in the backend of Magento to configure your Varnish server. So once connecting Varnish to Magento, it's possible to connect Varnish and use also the default full page cache layer on the backend of Magento. One thing you should be aware of: by default, Varnish doesn't support, for numerous reasons, no SSL feature. And while we are using Magento, and definitely since the 17th of December 2005, full SSL layers referred by the Google specifications, it's really mandatory to start using Varnish. So be aware when using Varnish and FPC, it's still possible. It's possible to offload your SSL to a dedicated server who only serves SSL. This is something which doesn't come out of the box for those who go there. And looking, for instance, at performance regions, when testing it, definitely with Varnish on a mobile device, like I just mentioned, the test that I did from New York to Berlin, it really had a really good understanding on serving the products on the same speed. Next slide, please. So, looking at some of the best practices, while I was writing the Magento 2 cookbook, I came across all those new really cool features within Magento 2, like Roy already mentioned, the Magento testing framework. Looking right now at those features which are available by default, it's a great enhancement. Just before going live now, we have the ability, and also during test and development, to see how our application is performing, and creating some DDT test, test-driven test to see if our application is working as we want it, if our checkout is working, and also if the performance on our checkout is working. One of the new really cool features within Magento 2 is now the ability to create using a profile on the specifications you prefer. Let's say my shop or my client shop is going to be running 3 websites, 3 store views, and I need maybe 100,000 products in there. Now we can set up a XML file with a profile based on just demo data, let Magento run and create all the categories and products within our environment. And on the screen, you see on the right-hand side the output, how it should look like. So everything is based on well, physical data. It's being filled automatically in the backend. Depending on your profile, it takes some time to create all the elements within Magento. Using the extra large profile is also available. There are 5 default profiles you can custom like you want. Is Magento, depending on also your hosting environment, well, need some time to set all the data in there. So be aware, if you want to create an extra large profile, prefer to have a really heavy duty server, and it will take up to several hours to creating the products. So it's better to prepare for that and just only run it. Next slide, please. So, like I already mentioned, there are some things you have to look out for, definitely when upgrading or what's expected from your Magento 1 to Magento 2 journey. I mean, if you want to start from scratch in Magento 2, it's really great, but some of those are there that probably have already a Magento 1 version. There's a really nice migration tool default within Magento, and from 1.5 till 1.9, there are migration scripts available depending on your version and minor versions in between. While using that, it's really comfortable to know that you first have to use the default configuration elements, like your store, how many store views you got, and then you can import the categories and the products. And depending on how many products you have, it will take some time to convert your Magento 1 to the Magento 2 install base. And Magento also advised to run the Magento 1 installation on the same server as the Magento 2 instance, because all the database elements in Magento 1 needs to be converted to the Magento 2 database. So it will take some time. And throughout the whole process, it will help you and guide you. While using that and working on it, it's really advised to always have a backup. So it's better to create as many as you prefer. And one really also important expectation when you start is depending if you want to use a multi-website environment like multi-store. When I was writing the book, I came across some really interesting challenges, which had some issues which are currently shared on the Magento Git issue tracker regarding setting up a Magento multi-store environment. So be aware of that. And also when using the Magento configurable products, as we speak, like before, it's a really cool tool. But when creating a configurable, Magento creates virtual products by default on that. And if you want to create simples, you have to add those manually right now. So hopefully in the near future, it's possible that simple products are created when running configurable instead of virtuals, because you probably will get into some issues regarding to the quantity and the inventory elements on that. Next slide, please. So what are some of the recommendations that I go by? One really interesting one that I've seen so far, Magento, all dev docs relate to an Apache setup, which is really interesting to see how to create an instance on Magento using Apache. But looking currently at Magento 1, we've seen a lot of Nginx deployments as a default base for Magento 1. So I would imagine that definitely when using Magento 2, a lot of people were interested in covering that. Default on the current Magento pages, there's nothing covered on Nginx. So throughout the writing on the books, I decided to use mainly Nginx on covering all those elements. And there are some really cool details on how to split or use Nginx versus Apache on that one. So be aware once you start want to create a Magento environment, if you want to use a production environment on Nginx, start also on a local Nginx environment. Because then you will probably see the differences between the application running on a dev environment, development environment, and running on a production environment. And one of the really cool features which is out there at the moment is Docker. It's a really fancy tool to easily create your instance locally. It's even possible to create your Docker Magento 2 instance by just some really minor small commands using it on Windows, on a Mac, or on Linux. So every operating system makes it available to use a Dockerize. So it's a container holding Magento 2 information in there, and you can use it wherever you want. Once you do that and you want to try and create a production environment, well, now using Magento 2, we need to compile the code and create some static code when Magento is getting into production. And that's a whole different procedure compared to Magento 1. So every development-based environment with Magento, which is going to production, needs to be compiled. So once you try that, be aware that the hosting development information setup is the same as the one on production. I did some tests regarding to all those elements, and I found out that if you don't create your local instance the same, you will definitely get in trouble and you will spend more time debugging. So this will definitely save some time at the end on that part. One of the really nice features that I came across on definitely Nginx is that when deploying a theme or creating a theme, there are currently also some issues regarding to Nginx. So be aware and don't get stuck too much time on debugging that. But hopefully in the near future, Apache and also Nginx are the same when starting development and also using deployment on that one.
Ray, can I ask? I'm going to use my open mic and jump in with a question.
Oh yeah, definitely, Roy.
Did you try? We were discussing Docker before, and the idea with Docker is actually to create, I think, a virtual environment which you can then replicate wherever, in development, in production, etc.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah. So my question was, did you actually run the whole Magento installation within Docker on production?
Oh yeah, I did. Well, when writing the book, and it's also, I mean, everything is documented already there, and it's possible to already, well, go to GitHub, to my GitHub account, and start using there. Created 2 Docker environments, one including sample data, one a clear one. And I tested locally on Mac, Windows, and Linux on a testing bed, but also on production. And it's really cool to see the possibilities using Magento 2 in Docker, and definitely it's worth trying to use it on a production environment, because it really saves a lot of time on your DevOps.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's actually, again, this is something that is very present in software companies and software development shops, and we're actually talking about it as well. And Docker is one of the, it's a huge trend right now. It's very popular, and one of the reasons is because it takes the pain out of actually replicating the same environment in production and in development, because it creates a virtual environment that you can just offload or upload into your production server. So it takes that risk away.
But it's also possible for when using it during a production development stage that everybody is using the same build. So if you want to update something regarding your environment, you can really easily create a new build. It's automatically uploaded to your Docker hub, and every new developer, if it's running on a test environment using DTAB, it's easily deployed because everything is centralized, and because all the files are all stored as a configuration in Git, everybody can maintain it and push it directly to Docker, the Docker hub, and deploy it within a couple of seconds.
Yeah, great. Okay, so. So we've discussed on how to upgrade. There's I think by now you should have an overview of some of the things that are desirable, some of the pitfalls and things to watch out for. very specific things that that Ray, I think, spent some time on, I'm guessing, with the product and entering virtual products instead of real products. So some nice tricks. And also the benefits. The benefits are really a lot of streamlining contracts and order being put into the application. Once you deploy, though, of course, there are always surprises, or even if the deployment is going well, you need to make sure that it goes well as the store evolves. I actually remember a talk that Ray, I think we had back in Amsterdam at the time, about the kind of sinus graph of a store coming out of the shop, like being deployed and running smoothly, and then slowly deteriorating as products are added, servers are scaled, coupons and add-ons, etc., are added, and then going into the shop again, optimized, and then again, it's kind of a cycle that is known. And there are many moving parts. As better at it as Magento 2 is going to be, there are still many moving parts, including CDNs, caches, databases, multiple databases right now, multiple servers, etc., that can delay you. And we're not even talking about extensions, shippings, payment, product display, etc. Many moving parts that can fail depending on time, depending on deployment, etc. So it's only natural that you would want to know that your store is running smoothly, and this is actually what Shoppimon is all about. But there are also ways to do it manually, or actually use existing tools, either free or available with Magento, to kind of make sure that everything is running as it is expected. So the first thing that the more technical crowd is familiar with is Nagios. Nagios is actually a monitoring platform that you're able to use in order to view parameters mainly on your server, CPUs, memory, etc., and make sure that everything is running in reasonable capacity, and be able to see if something there needs an upgrade or if something is failing. So you should have Nagios or something like that in place to collect metrics and make sure that your servers are tweaked and are not overloaded and are able to serve the needs of your customers. Then we are looking at user experience, and we touched a bit about Selenium a bit before with the testing framework. So testing and monitoring, and it's funny, we just had a quick discussion about that a couple of hours ago. It's the same chain, but it's a different business. So with testing, you make sure that your units that you just developed are actually working as expected. You're testing specific parameters. You're testing, for example, an add to cart, and making sure that it works. And then if you install a new extension or change something in the process, testing the same parameters to see that it repeats itself. And these tests are often being performed from the user perspective. So if we're looking at Nagios, Nagios is actually monitoring the servers. With Selenium, you can actually write scripts that mimic user actions. So you need to have a bit of a technical ability. You need to be able to write scripts. By the way, you need to maintain them and maintain versions, because they break as scripts tend to break as you update your store. But once you have these scripts, you can mimic actions users do in your store, like logging in or going to a product category, etc. And you need to run the scripts either when you deploy a new version to make sure that nothing breaks, or maybe on a regular basis, I don't know, once an hour, depending on the load that they will create for your store, and in order to make sure that things are functioning. It's a good solution. It's better than nothing. There are a few issues with that, because it will affect your analytics. It will require a server. It will require some code maintenance. But you need to do something to make sure that that the customer can go through the store and that everything is actually up and running. Another aspect of it, this is more analytics, and in hindsight, is using Google Analytics, which I'm sure every one of you does, and if you're not, then you should. Google Analytics also have some advanced metrics that you're able to configure products and prices there, and they will give you a view of how your store is performing. Well, not performing, but how the users are navigating your store de facto. So once the data is collected, once users have been to your store, you can see a view of Google Analytics regarding the pages that they visited, popular products, popular courses to the stores. There's a lot of data there. You need to do a lot of data chewing in order to get the gold that is hidden within the Google Analytics, I would say, haystack. But there's no going around it. You need to know what your users are doing, and Google Analytics is also a way to see how users react, or if there are anomalies in the way users are buying through your store. For example, if you see that Monday mornings are slow, and or I don't know, something more specific, Tuesday at 3:30. You see that bounce rates, meaning bounce rates are up, meaning users are getting to your stores and they're leaving it more than they usually do. Then you can take this data and try to dig deeper, maybe go into Magento error logs and find correlations between issues that the store is experiencing and the dropout rate of the customers. There are also automatic tools that do that. Shoppimon actually were looking to integrate that as well, so we'll have that automatically. But if you're using these two tools, this is a great way to understand the impact of issues as found in the logs on actual customers, and also to react. It's not as proactive as Selenium maybe, because Selenium will tell you if there's an issue before users are dropping. But again, it's better than nothing, and it's better to know a week after if users are dropping and fix it than not knowing at all. So obviously, Google Analytics is a must. And again, Magento logs can be again a big haystack, and you can use some log aggregators to find anomalies and find like issues that you know, to collect them for you and to bring that up and alert you on it. So the process is not as manual as it is if you need to sift through the logs, and is not as reactful, but more proactive, so less reactive, as it is if you're sifting through logs or if you're looking at Google Analytics. Thank you. Looking at initial results, so we have here, what we have here is actually the results that we've been collecting over years for Magento 1. We're monitoring more than 3,000 websites. We're crunching all the numbers into one average. It's a very gross average, but these are the numbers that we see in terms of a full load, and a full load is everything, including everything, images, JavaScript, and everything that is loaded, apart from things that are loaded, like AJAX or calls that are happening after that. These are our averages. Typically, good websites or websites that are maintained by pretty good agencies, SupportDesk, by the way, being one, you can see averages that are much better than this. And looking at Magento 2, as Ray said, it looks like it's blazing fast. We don't have the numbers in Magento 2, as there are not enough Magento 2 stores out there for us to gauge, and the ones that are out there are in various stages of deployment and development, so they're not necessarily running at peak performance. But looking at an accomplished Magento 2 store as an example, a cosmetics, I think, customer of ours, we see a homepage load time blazing fast, almost half a second, just above half a second. And I think that is enabled by all the elements that we've been discussing, the caching, the splitting of the databases, and the scalability, increased scalability. So we're looking forward to having more numbers. We know I've shared before the numbers of the benchmarks. These are benchmarks on similar servers, etc. It's not the same thing. We're always happy to get the actual numbers. Benchmark numbers are nice. The actual numbers of stores that are actually deployed and need to deal with all the hassles of deployment and updates and hostings and CDNs, etc. They're often different than the clean benchmarks that are out there. So we'll be waiting on more Magento stores to collect more Magento, on more Magento 2 stores to collect more Magento 2 stats. Once we have it, I'm sure that we'll share it. We'll do maybe we'll do a blog post, or we'll do a comparison of a few chosen stores, depending on how fast this is going. But the initial stats are showing real promise. It looks extremely fast. Next slide, please. Thanks. The question that I'm guessing most of you is the reason for most of you attending this webinar is the bottom line. Should I or should I not migrate to Magento 2? So I think, and Ray, please, happy to have you jump in here as well. My thoughts about it is that you need to look at Magento 2 as not as a feature set, but as a platform that may or may not fit your needs. So, for example, if you're starting a store right now, of course, you'd want to start with Magento 2. There are a few hiccups and a few extensions that are not available. So, unless you need them, I think there is no reason not to start with Magento 2. And definitely looking at gradually decreasing support for Magento 1, planned end of life in November 2018. But even before that, only bug fixes and security patches. So this means that you will not get significant improvements on the old platform on Magento 1. That's reason enough, again, unless you have a specific extension or integration that is not yet available in Magento 2, in which case contact the vendor and make them do it for you. I see no reason not to start with this platform. Moving to Magento 2, you need to consider a few things. First of all, you need to consider the reason for moving. If the reason for moving is scalability issues, the cost of upgrades, and things that we've touched on before, then I think it makes sense to consider it. It's a project. It's not free, so it makes sense to consider it. If your store has custom extensions or extensions that are not yet supported, if you're not planning an upgrade anyway, maybe it's time to wait. If you are planning an upgrade, then I think it's worth considering. Again, giving the scalability improvements, the security in terms of stability and the upgrade path of minor versions, and the support that is going to window down both from extension providers but also from Magento itself. Ray, anything to add here?
Well, I think you covered a lot already, and I think really depending on your business needs and also the budget. And so be aware, it's when you jump from Magento 1 to Magento 2, you have to start all over. Some clients already asking, it's like, okay, probably it's an upgrade, like all those upgrades similar to, let's say, Magento 1 to Magento 1, Magento 8 to Magento 9. No. It's a whole different ball game. You have to definitely start from scratch. You can definitely migrate some of the really important data from Magento 1 till 2. That's possible, but rely to the extensions. And some of them out there that I've seen all over the years are or custom made or vendor based. Well, depending on the vendor, it still applies if they already got a patch or an upgrade for the module. If it's custom made, you probably have to be aware on what's possible and how can we create it. And like Magento already mentioned, be aware on your budget and definitely increase it by 20% as of now. So if you've got a really positive budget, definitely continue working on Magento 2. If you're starting a new shop and all your needs are available, please start also with Magento 2. If it's possible to spread it, maybe we'll check in a couple of months what the possibilities are and go by there.
Okay, great.
Awesome. So thank you very, very much, Ray. And we're going to get to questions in just a sec. A few have already come in, and we'll do our best to answer them all. If you have questions that you haven't written in about, now is the time to do it. But before we get to the questions, as you can see on your screen, definitely feel free to click the link. If you'd like to learn more about Magento 2 than what we've been able to cover in less than an hour today, don't forget to check out the chance to win a free copy of Ray's Magento 2 cookbook, which is coming out in the very near future. And if you are happening by Imagine in just about a month and a half time, he'll be there doing a book signing. So definitely make sure to stop by and say hello and get a book signed. Additionally, if you guys are thinking about making the move to Magento 2, or if you're already in the process, definitely contact us, reach out. You see our mine and Louise's email at the bottom of the screen, and let us know, because we are opening up our Magento 2 beta support for invite-only merchants and retailers at this time. So definitely let us know. We'd love to have you join the beta program. Okay, so straight to the questions. One question that we've gotten actually from a couple of places, which we touched on really, really briefly during the webinar, is when they're going to stop supporting Magento 1, and if you're going to be forced to move to Magento 2 anytime in the near future. Ray, Roy, anybody want to go back over that in detail?
Well, I mean, like you already mentioned, Magento is due on November 2018. Looking at that brief timeline and looking at, for instance, PHP, there's a whole debate going on how long will Magento support, for instance, the Magento 5.x stack. And currently, as of today, Magento released a really new update on a security fix, which goes back to Magento 5.3, for instance, which is end of life. So hopefully Magento otherwise will support Magento 5.x. Personally, if it's possible, and definitely with Magento 2, start already using PHP 7. It's a lightning fast PHP platform, which saves definitely more than 50% already on load times. So if you have the possibility to join Magento 2, use PHP 7 on that, and skip the whole debate regarding to PHP 5.
Yeah,
awesome.
That's actually a big point there. The PHP 7 is a huge improvement on PHP 5, and it's not sure that Magento 1 will ever get it.
Perfect. Yeah, that's actually another question that people had asked, so that definitely clarifies it. So another question that we received is whether or not a shop can continue to run while switching over to Magento 2, or if they're going to have to go offline while they're making the physical switch.
Probably I will jump into that. Looking, for instance, at the Magento migration tool, there's an option where it's possible just before you switch the line to Magento 1 to 2 to migrate the latest updates regarding, for instance, products and probably sales data. So during the time that you while starting the migration, will probably take a couple of months. So you will probably start with a first install, and then at the end you create a delta on the latest updates and you migrate them. Looking right now at the data that I tested, it's possible to do a really quick planned migration, depending well on how much data is updated. So you can do a update data just like 24 hours in advance, which saves a lot of time already. And just before going live, do the most recent update and switch your DNS so it's being configured to a definitely new dedicated server, then you probably will be fine in a couple of minutes of downtime, depending how important your setup is. But it's doable. It's doable.
Okay, awesome. And one last question we had gotten is about different performance metrics that we had shared throughout the presentation, and whether or not those were for Community or Enterprise Edition. To the best of my knowledge, they were for Enterprise, but Ray, Roy, feel free to jump in.
Well, some of the features, I'm sorry, Roy, if you want to go first, please.
No, I'm wondering which metrics it refers to. So, for example, the throughput, I think, was measured on Enterprise Edition with the scalable databases. So these are the numbers that I discussed in the beginning, with also the bottom line numbers of cash register, checkout and the number of users. These are my numbers, by the way, on estimates on how many pages users are viewing and what the average checkout sum is. The Shoppimon numbers on the averages are Magento 1, and these are gross numbers of all the versions of Magento of all 3,000 websites. So we did not distinct between Enterprise Edition and Community Edition there. Ray, were there any other numbers there?
Well, I think you covered the basics. I know from some slides that I've seen last year at Magento Imagine in Las Vegas, Magento shared some in-depth on Magento Enterprise regarding to Magento Community, where more backend users had the ability to start using it. Well, during the whole book writing process, I did both Community and Enterprise, and unfortunately I didn't have time to create a really lifelike enterprise-based setup with multiple servers and multiple users and compare them business-wise to the performance Magento came across. So hopefully in the near future I have time and maybe a customer who's willing to do some tests on. But for right now, looking at the numbers that I'm seeing in the back end, also the front end, it looks more or less the same.
Great. And Ray, we've actually got a question for you on what your advice would be for going for the best responsive and mobile solution for an M2 site. Noting that in the past your advice for mobile was to use a separate mobile theme.
Yeah, well, that's a really nice question. I mean, there's one chapter 6. It's regarding the Magento theming layout, and we had a discussion. I mean, I'm writing the book with Vladimir Kerkhoff. He's my partner in crime on writing the book, and we came across some possibilities to still use some native dynamic serving, it's called, abilities. I've done some studies over the years. There's some presentations which are on my account on Prezi regarding to some myth regarding to responsive web design. I still love it, but I've seen a lot of really worth implementations over the years. And I'm looking right now at the one that Magento created. I have to be honest, it's really impressive. The thing still is, depending on your customer needs, looking for instance right now within, well, definitely United States and Europe, everybody has fast connections, but I've done some tests on some feature phones. So that's not a smartphone, a feature phone, for instance, Firefox OS. Unfortunately, it's not being available anymore, but I still have some devices here, and I know depending on your bandwidth and plan, it really depends on the speed you have. And to be honest, still regarding to responsiveness, it takes a lot of time to render all the details. Well, Magento 2 is doing a hell of a job, but in some cases it's still better to use a native one and only share the information which is needed. And one of the really cool features, hopefully in the near future, will solve that. It's a tag called the picture element. Once we start using that one, definitely responsiveness will have a better understanding on what image, on what device, and maybe also what bandwidth is possible, because otherwise it takes a lot of time to download it, and the user experience will definitely have a negative impact on that one. and maybe probably in the future it's getting monitored by Shoppimon. That would be even greater to see what's the best approach and where your customers are, and if you want to use dynamic serving versus responsiveness.
Yeah, definitely. I don't want to expose any trade secrets, but Ray has taught me in several conversations that we had that responsive design is not only how things are displayed, but they're also dependent on the browser and how many concurrent connections or requests it can handle, which varies vastly on a mobile device, plus obviously the bandwidth, which is why I think the recommendation to use a separate a separate site for mobile devices before has been in place. So now hopefully it will be better, and yeah, and I think we will definitely with Shoppimon, I think we will definitely monitor that going forward as well.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. In case you didn't get the chance yet to sign up for a Magento 2 cookbook or for the Magento 2 beta support at Shoppimon, we'll follow up and send you a second opportunity in the near future. We hope you found the webinar very helpful and insightful, and we look forward to seeing you at additional ones in the future. Have a great rest of the day, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.